Good afternoon to everyone. The people here and the ones who are online. My name is Divine Fu. I'm the Director of HUMA, the Institute for Humanities in Africa, and also Associate Professor of Anthropology, or Social Anthropology, yes, at the University of Cape Town, that is here in South Africa, where we're having this discussion. And welcome to the HUMA Ataya Interdisciplinary Seminar series. And this is, I think, our second lecture or seminar in the fourth quarter. We are in the first and last quarter of the year. There is a list of other seminars, I think, that is online. I don't know if I should say they are on our website, but they are online somewhere. The Ataya Seminar is a very critical part of HUMA's program and mandate, which is created to convene critical conversations and to have different kinds of encounters. And the interdisciplinary seminars is a space for ideas and connections, but also both a physical and virtual space, which encourages different kinds of intellectual engagements and conversations. And the intention is also to advance both the vision of the university and the faculty. And it really provides us with many, many different exchanges. For the rest of the seminars, as indicated, you can find the program online and also on our different social media platforms. And we can now say that you can subscribe to our newsletter. But just to indicate that we are recording this session today, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. And the session is also available on Teams for those who are subscribed. And please let any of these colleagues know if you do not want to appear, or your photo to appear, or your image to appear in any video that has that we have, and they will make sure that they will veil that. So it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and my colleague, Professor Dulce Pereira, who will be giving a talk to us today entitled An Overview of Mining, Corporations and National States, which is also around the theme of connected histories of territories under duress. Dulce, as I've indicated, is a friend of mine, but also of ours, and also a new fellow at the Institute. This thing is misbehaving here. Dulce has a training in and also is an architect. We do like people who do architecture. Also because we need refurbishing in our space. But the importance of architecture in our work. But Dulce is an architect, Dulce is a professor and also a researcher at the Universidade Federal de Ouro, Preto, which she likes to call UFOP. And she's coordinator of the Environmental Education and Research Laboratory, called LEA and AUEPAS, at the Federal University of Ouro, Preto, that's UFOP, and specialized in environmental education and in public policy diplomacy. She is at the same time a doctoral fellow and also a postdoctoral fellow. She postgraduate also has a postgraduate training in engineering and material sciences and in law and development. And currently, she is really dedicating her second PhD, which she indicated that it was important to do it because of her current research, and she thought that historical methods would be important, to ask and advance the questions that she's doing around affirmative action in mining. So it was important to not just read history, but to actually undertake training in history. So it's best to ask this question. So she's dedicating her second doctoral work in connected histories at the Federal University of Maranhão, researching a mining affected territory in the Amazon, in which she delves into questions of territories that are under duress, processes of crisis, withdrawal of socio-environmental, economic, and cultural rights in territories that are pressured by the action of state corporations, identifying different processes, damages, and searching for alternatives for reparations and re-existence, And I know that Dulce is very humble in her bio, but Dulce has also extensive experience in government, and also in a lot of diplomatic work and building cooperation. And amongst many things in her on fellowship here is to deepen the cooperation between South Africa and Brazil, and also between Africa and Brazil and Africa and Latin America, through many projects, including exchanges, and to develop initiatives that advance work within BRICS, which is also one of the major initiatives that we are seeking to work on here and advance exchanges between the two countries. So we are looking forward to listening to you and the work that you're doing, comparing Brazil and South Africa and many other. So you have 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes to speak, and then we will use the rest of the time to engage you and ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I have to thank my colleagues, for the great support you've been giving me, in those almost 15 days I've been at HUMA, and my colleagues in other departments as well. And really have to thank Dr. Divine Fu, because he's a friend. He became a great friend, also a mentor, which is fundamental, and I desperately needed mentors. So now I have two. I have Dr. Fu, and I have Professor Dr. Alívio, whom you will meet definitely in Brazil, who is really working with me in this study in the Amazon and in this whole process. I have to say that I was very nervous, before when we had this idea of presenting this work, for many reasons. One of them is that I have been changing very much some of the approaches I had before coming to South Africa and before coming to HUMA. And I will show you this reality. And the project I'm working on is a multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary study, and also interinstitutional study. And being at HUMA was a choice because the whole process of human, non-human became fundamental and central in this for this study. I chose a methodology when I was in Brazil, which is a multi-method methodology that I am anchored a lot on one of the researchers, a very, very important researcher in Brazil, and was important for me also, who's Professor Mayara Machado. And she produces very much on law and development with the dealing with territories and coming from the territories to the studies and to the process of research. Also, very well known in Brazil, not well known in the world, a historian called Beatriz Nascimento. Beatriz Nascimento was one of the first historians to really deal with Atlantic civilizations and talk to the connections, in the Atlantics, in the history of the Atlantics, and the importance of studying the Atlantics to understand even Brazil. So it's an empiric study in history, and the concepts of human and non-human are being redefined on my approach to the connections, and especially because I realized that if I'm going to study the connections, to deepen on this phenomenon of mining and the consequence of mining the territories and also the possible alternatives, I cannot just think of the connections of Brazil and South Africa, but I have to look at the general African processes, which I have very short time to do, but I am now reading and expanding my literature and starting with a big problem we face, that we do not have accessible African production, not just in Brazil, but in South America, in Latin America, and in the Caribbean. One of the excuses is always language, but language is not a problem for us to receive, for example, literature from Europe in English, right? Or in French. So most of the books I'm having the chance to work on, African books, I have been in contact with them since I arrived here. And I have to tell you, I'm a very studious person. I dedicate myself deep into reading and so on. I even was in contact now with some literature that was banned during apartheid, and a very important for the process I'm working on. So, and I decided to choose two areas, two territories, one in Brazil, one in South Africa, to do this study on how corporations and the state interfere or deal or change the reality of the territories, especially in the case of mining. And to start with, I have to tell you why I did that. And one of my first this poem that I have here in this slide by Benedict, I think you say Vilasaki, really made me define the area I was going at first to study in South Africa, because obviously he's writing, and he was writing about the reality in Rustenburg. There are some changes now, and I will talk to you about it. When did I start this? When I was the General Secretary for the Humanities of Portuguese-speaking countries as an ambassador. And one of the concerns at that time was East Timor. I really operated very much on the installation of the state of East Timor. And obviously, I was working with 5 African countries. When I entered the community, they were all in conflicts, and I had the honor to say that the formal conflicts were all finished when I finished my mandate. And as I was preparing for one of the UN conferences, I came across a discourse by President Allende from Chile, because 2 years ago, he made a very meaningful discourse talking about the way corporations operated in our countries, and he was referring to southern countries, but also to Chile, and how they operated in a way to interfere and to control states, and also to control the state democracy. and to even interfere on the quality of democracy. And he said that part of his statement was that all the institutions that there were in the North to destabilize the democratic regimes, or, and he questioned also the quality of democracy, but all those, for example, the CIA, and all of those spying and other institutions would not be so necessary anymore, because the corporations would do the job of controlling the states and of defining how the post-colonial process of control would happen in the different circumstances. Why did I choose Allende? And I kept, after looking at all different positions and studies, Allende was really a president who tried not to betray the nation, as he said, and he kept very much all the commitments he had with the process he was elected to lead in the country. And obviously he was, a victim of a coup d'etat. And he also spoke about the way the corporations used even the armed forces at that time. So Allende was the start point for this study. That is an ecologist, Pan-Africanist, decolonial, and feminist research. So I want to really position that. In November of 2015, my university, the University, of Federal of Ouro Preto, and Ouro Preto means gold mine, is in the beautiful state of Minas Gerais, and in the city of Ouro Preto, but the city nearby is called Mariana, and I used to live in Mariana. So I was celebrating my birthday in my hometown in São Paulo. And then I got a call from the director of the school, as I had been the Secretary of Education of the city of Mariana for a short time. And she was screaming on the phone, just saying, Professora, as they call, Professor, the school we remodeled when you were there is being destroyed. So I said, the school is being destroyed, the school. She said, we are under an avalanche of mining residues coming over the city. A friend called me immediately after and said, did you see what is happening here? It's a professor also at the university, and said, I think you should come here because you need to see what's happening, and the university has to take position on that. So what I found, you see the picture down there, at the bottom, was this. It was this image there. And the rural area of Mariana, and what was amazing was that I left from the airport to my house. My house was perfect. The city was perfect downtown. But the rural area that is, going down was this, the image was this one you see here. And we then went a bit farther to, from the city of Mariana, and, which is here, we went, there was a place that we used to go to have our seminars and so on. And then we went to the next town because people were calling and saying, last night, the company said that the mud would not get here, and the mud is here. So what happened was that, the mud went, all the way to the sea, about 879 kilometers. That was the trajectory, and villages, cities fishing communities, in native indigenous communities of the most preserved basin, river basin we had was totally destroyed. As you can see here in this picture. So what happened? We were very much committed to study the area, because immediately after that, and 2 or 3 days after that, lots of people started getting ill in those places. 19 people died. And then it was considered a big event. That was the word used for it at the beginning. You know, a big environmental event. And even the president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, was convinced by many of the assistants that it was not a technological disaster, as we were already defining as, but that it was just an environmental event. The president, who is a fantastic woman committed to Brazil, issued a decree saying that the event was romantic and that the state would take care of the process. So we went back to her and said, President, it was not an event. It was a technological disaster. It was a technological crime, and it has to be treated, you know, that way. Well, the reality is that up to now, most of the people have not had their homes restored. We are, and the day after tomorrow, we have a big discussion with some of the instances of government and also some of the judiciary instances, presenting all the studies that were done there, because most of the people have not still been recognized as affected people. Of the people we interviewed, about the people of that my group interviewed in some of the focus discussion groups we had, 11 of them have died from these different diseases. We found out, you know, and I'm telling you about studies done by the most committed scientists. I was just talking to one of them today. Now, the most committed and well-known scientists in geology, in chemistry, and so on. I coordinated this research. And most of them have been denied. The very committed attorneys in the state of Minas Gerais, you know, went through a process of being very much dequalified, and some of them were removed and so on. And up to this day, there is a lawsuit in England. Many the 3 responsible companies, Samarco, Vale, and BHP, deny and really go back to court to not accepting the sentences, neither the Brazilian sentence. In February of this month, there was a Brazilian sentence really deciding that they should pay, and they have still, I don't know how we say it when you contest the result of the action.
Appeal.
Yes, appeal. Yes, they appealed in court. And concerning to the process in England, Vale made an agreement, which is sort of a secret agreement so far, left. It is not being considered in the whole process anymore. And BHP, Pennington, and Samarco are still being part of this process. And this process demanded compensation for the people. Then, in 2019, again, we were called to explain what happened at another area of the same state, in Paraopeba Basin, another river basin, where there was a the rupture of a mine, many of the workers who were at the time at the area were killed. And the company denied that it was Vale at this time, the corporation denied that that they were fully responsible for that. In the first case, they said that there was some type of earth tremor. In this case, they said that there were some anomalies and denied it. So we proved, and I sent you an article, I don't expect you to read all that article, but I sent an article that shows that yes, the responsibility was of the company, especially because there were documents that were taken and sent to those companies saying that that would happen. It's not that it could happen, that would happen. So obviously we worked with the images of satellite and so on. It showed that there was water. Whenever you have water in a dam, those pipelines, they cannot have water. That's in technology, in engineering, that's the first scene, if you want to refer, So again, the whole basin was contaminated. The same procedures, the companies decided that they were not going to take the mud out, and this is something we're still struggling. The results are unpredictable. You can see here the images of what the area looks like just before, and the area looked like just a month after, and I would say we had the privilege of especially the part of the legal system and all the people who are affected and the different social movements trust us to do a research to show, to indicate exactly what the impacts were. And we refined very much our research. We refined it very much because it has to do a bit with the methodology. But for example, in the first case of the Dulce Basin, we found out, for example, that there were amazing changes in the environment. We found out that many of the trees that were dying especially because of the concentration of metal, in the soil. And then they were capturing the heat. So we had an increase of about 5 to 7 centigrades, in the heat. So obviously the plants died and the trees died and so on and so forth. Here, after working there, we started really discussing in groups, and I had again the privilege of being trusted to coordinate this research group with those scientists from different areas, And here, I'm going to say we included many more scientists from humanities, which was fundamental, because both areas are areas where you have traditional communities, high concentration of Black population, historical communities. So we were able to really show that in the areas become sacrifice areas, as we have defined, sacrifice areas, because the post-disaster, there is no post-disaster, and even the technologies, we have been changing the technologies in science because there's not post-disaster. You have the continuity of the tragedy every day, But we also refine the type of research we're doing. And we indicate, for example, where the different human groups live, indigenous, Blacks. For example, if you see here, you have, this light blue and the red are where the Black population lives. And we have a few indigenous populations and territories. And also we have some Asian population living in a very rare and very small population, but we have some Asian population here. All of those maps, I know I have them in big size, and we can see them later if we want to and discuss, because it's so we started discussing really, I mean, this human, non-human treatment. And we started connecting those histories with histories that happened in other places in the world. I had already worked with the Katrina disaster, you know, and really, and see who are the people who are just chosen to die in one or another way, especially due to contamination. These are the newsletters that are being published by the people, and our researchers are being used as a reference for their struggles at the judiciary and with executive. And we also were able to develop methodologies of really hearing the people. So we started, if before we discussed very much the technical issues. Now, because after that, you see that the history goes on. We really started, for example, researching the contamination from metals and so on, after listening to what is happening to the people, how people observe that, and then we give special attention to those territories. And obviously, you see the pictures, most of the population is Afro-Brazilian, you know, indigenous, native indigenous Brazilians. And I just show you those tables to show the amazing high contamination we found, for example, in the air. And it has lots of connection what we're studying here in those areas I decided to study here. You know, it's an amazing high contamination of metals. I'm not going to be discussing that here, but also then if you see the alliances they make, the way they interact, and what they can cause and the distance they go. So one of the big issues now, especially in some of the rich areas in Minas Gerais, is that, well, we are being affected by the contaminated air that comes from this area, because those areas are most rural areas. And also, so it's just amazing the amount of metals that we found in those areas. And I introduced, because that's a fishing, people live, from fishing. So we, apart from soil and plants and so on, we also examined the fishes, and fishes at different levels, at the chain. And what we found is just something that could be considered, inhuman, because it's, no, not any of the natural elements that consume fishes should be consuming those fishes. Okay, I'm going fast now because, so we have lots of data and incontestable data. We also introduced here, because, that in Brazil, we have many Afro-Brazilian religious groups, and they have a very important role in community organization. We always say that they are the psychologists of most of the communities as well, because they are very much connected to the problems, community problems. They are very connected. They're very important in the schooling processes. So we also identified all those groups, and we not just researched the areas where they are, but listened to them. And it was very important. We could someday talk about that, because they say we are part of nature. If nature is destroyed, we are destroyed. We cannot use, and we cannot use the teas, we cannot use the herbs for rituals or anything. And so it became a very meaningful. And we studied all the different impacts of the community. But it was not enough just studying the impacts. We really were looking at the executive response and also the judiciary response. And, just so that you know, in any area where you have such a high rate of contamination, you should have the action of the health system. In Brazil is an example in the public network system. I don't know if you know that. SUS is really an example for the world because it's public health system. The public health system ignored all of the consequences of the disasters. And so people went there having other type of medications and things like this, and many people dying, and many people with skin diseases and things like that. Secondly, we are working very seriously on our transition platforms, energy transition, as we know all countries are. And none of that was considered for those areas. Where in those areas have amazing impact in climate change. They have very meaningful impact on the transition agenda, especially because they are fundamental river basins, and they concentrate a great number of people, but they also influence the weather in the whole area. So we have almost all those areas, amazing change in climate changes, and change, for example, in the rain system, due to what's happened in those places. And we're not talking about, for example, a very located social technological crime or social technological event. And, so I think that we know it happens in many countries, but we know the importance in countries where you have mining as one of the prime or one of the most important economic activities. So, obviously, I show you here, the map with all the dots in red are the mines that are in risk in Brazil, And then I went back to Fanon, when Fanon discusses the nature of the development of the post-colonial and the influence in modern history, and obviously in the timeline of building the concepts of who's human, who's not human, who should be treated as human, So, but then we're going to get to the area that I am going to have as a reference to study here. This is an area where we have the largest gold mine in an open pit in Brazil. And it is an area called Arizona, Ouro Gold, right? A company in 2007 established itself as a small mining company, had all of its protocols approved by the state government, by federal government, and did all the procedures. Started mining there, and then in fact, it was a Canadian mining company that, from that small approval, became one of the most important initiatives in mining in the world. And so there was another dam breakage here. It's a small place, and there are two districts One district is called Godofredo Viana. And then you have the district of Arizona. They are very close. The district of Arizona its data is disappearing even from all different government institutions. All, we go to our national institutions, for example, for data. We work very much and we were able to implement a very sophisticated system of disaggregating data. So this district has almost disappeared there. Why? Because this company is using the same process. This is what we are debating now. You create a fragile technological process. Then you say you're not responsible for the process because they said they were not responsible for it. They said that there was too much rain. So we were called again to see what happened. And there we were, and there we saw there was no rain at that time. There was not rain in the day. So, and to start with, one of the questions I asked, when we had all the attorney meetings and so on, and with the federal, the Supreme Court, was that what type of engineering are we performing? I mean, do we make dams out of paper that in the Amazon, because this is Amazon, this is the Amazon, where those dams just break like that because there is rain. We're talking about the rainy area. And the community is being threatened to leave the place. After the breakage of the dam, the community stayed for 3 months without water. And now the water is totally controlled by the company. And last month, this same corporation was included as one of the corporations that is part of the Secretariat of Environment of the state as a member of the council to protect the Amazon rainforest. So, and then when we study what the company says outside Brazil, in its publications, it's just totally another story. And when you see the project they have, we're talking about this region, in the Amazon, where we have, many protection areas. And here is the project published by the company for mining that now disappeared from all the material that they have. So I'm going to go fast now in talking about our connected history. So how many minutes do I have?
5, maximum.
5?
You finished.
Thank you. Thank you for your generosity. So, so now anchored in Beatriz Nascimento, she used to say that, what's African and what is American civilization, but a transatlantic civilization. So we are working very much with this concept. And then the area I'm studying here now, and the area I decided to be the center of the research is Jagensfontein. I always pronounce it in a very bad way. Jagensfontein.
Jagensfontein.
Yes, Jagensfontein. How many do you know or have been to this place? How many of you have heard of what exactly is happening there? Apart from Professor Ananda's reports. No one knows. It's the same situation as the one we are dealing with in the Amazon area. It's one of the oldest and more meaningful areas of diamond extraction. What happened there is very similar, and we've got information here from NASA maps. It's very similar to what happened in those areas I discussed. There was a breakage of the place, people are there without any possibility of really being fully compensated. It's treated as an event. These are the pictures of what happened, right after, and the process is the same. Social inequality, increase of land conflicts and violence, lack of infrastructure, impacts on health, human and cultural disqualification because people are dequalified all the time, external position by the powers of the corporations. It's exactly the same thing that is happening up in the Amazon area. And submission to the rhetoric that people should just leave that place. So it's very similar to what we are facing in different parts of the world. And talking to some of my friends in Susanna, we're talking about what happened also with a similar situation, what happened there. And it's been happening in many places, in Nigeria, in many other countries. And for example, in Mozambique, where some of the companies are the same, for example, Vale, is the same company, it's the same corporation that was there. And what happened in Jagenfontein is the same as happens in all of the other places. The judiciary says that there are no precise evidence, that they don't have precise references to decide on the reparations projects, and the executive many times is very much subordinated in all of our countries to the mines. In Brazil, for example, 6% of the gross production in Brazil is mining, but that means a lot concerning the presence of the country in exportation, negotiations, and so on and so forth. What we identify is that we have a process that could be defined as mine dependency due to the way the economic development model is designed, mining corruption, and very subtle corruption. Corruption goes to all different levels. It goes, at the university, for example, at my laboratory, how many times my students are almost convinced, that they should not be focusing on what they are focusing, and I have offers from some of the big corporations. Convincing people from the community and harassing them. In the case of the Amazon, many of the women who were protesting moved out of town, but most of them, and I have numbers that we could discuss later, got separated from their husbands because the husbands were furious with them, because they had the possibility of working at the mining process. And then, most of them are now sole mothers because they were abandoned. And they had to abandon the territory, and they were abandoned by sometimes the whole family, and definitely by the husbands. Try the type of cooperation programs they implement, and they negotiate with governments. And then obviously also the seduction of government officials and from the judiciary. I have to tell you something which we have a council of the judiciary. And after AUEPAS disaster, there were courses to form the judiciary on mining issues. Most of the courses were financed by the corporations, and the lawyers went to give the courses were corporation professionals. So mining subservience, for example, all the laws we try to pass at congresses are very much submitted to the pressure of those corporations. And my connivance, which is really, being submitted to the criterias, to the rhetoric, to the processes that those mining, especially the promise of development, the promise of quick development. So what we have is exactly what we've been having in the whole timetable of the unequal pattern of development we had before the colonizations that became much more sophisticated during colonial times, and that are now extremely well implemented in liberal democracies. So what you have is a dispute of territories, dispute for hegemony at the territories, and that is done by epistemicide, because you kill all the knowledge that you find in the territories, ecocide, and ethnocide. So this work tries dialogues with Allendez, Fanon, Beatriz, Nascimento, and different authors, and authors and artists who are trying or who have tried to make the academy and societies really try to understand the process, first of all, because most people don't understand. And even in very progressive governments, you can imagine, how difficult it is even to deal with this thing, right? And so this is part of the challenge we have, because now I don't consider it anymore. It's my challenge anymore, but it's our challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dulce. I know there's still a lot to say and a lot that we want to hear. Constrained by time, even though also generously we have time generously offered to us because you're here. But I'm going to open up and see if colleagues have questions. Yes, Azad.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, because we kind of relate, as you said, to all these. When we're talking about natural resources and the curse of natural resources of the country and for the people, so we kind of all relate to this. And I was just trying to think of, how could we have a different understanding or a kind of a new understanding, how could we theorize, how could we reach a common understanding and that summarize all those different narratives and cases that we have. And I was thinking let's start with the concept of the national state. Who is the national state here? We are talking about a national state that has really independent will and having the people the center of their work. Or we're talking about the compradors, the people who are just agents for foreign interests. And I mean, it's always the case, there's a government that's corrupted, but also if we look at it, in another way, I mean, to be honest, I'm like, because it's a kind of, we talk about mining, kind of also involves a lot of, yeah. I mean, now if you talk about Sudan, for example, the first we have is was the mining. Presently, basically, you know, and Sudan ended now it's like a battlefield of different foreign interests. And then people, agents who are on the ground who are facilitating these kind of things. And as you said, it's almost it's kind of ecocide, it's ethnocide, it's hystericide. They're completely destroying the country, moving people, destroying the ecosystem, destroying culture. And we really need to sit and seriously think about these questions. What is the national state in this sense? What is the military? What is the health system? What is, like, are we even one nation? Do we even represent the one nation? So I think these questions are very important to address. Sorry.
Alison, we're going to take 3 and allow you to respond. And then, yes, you're going to be here for a long time. So, Alison.
Responses to it. I think I spoke with you about the youth from Universidade that I was with before moving to Cape Town, and I know that some of them had moved to the US in 2015 and 2016, and I'm wondering what were those push factors now. I'm wondering if it was, not sure if it was the female there, but I'm thinking about how some of them in Somerville were the main ones pushing for like youth activism around protesting a particular hiring that was essentially splitting the city into where the rich families lived and where poor immigrants or particularly first generation immigrants lived. And so in their stories, seeing kind of these global reverberations of the intersections of like the environment and inequality in their lives, in the trajectory of their lives. And I'm also, I think, similar to yours, I'm wondering about the inescapability of this and what are the potentials for reimagining this differently.
Thank you.
Naledi.
Thank you. So it was about some very emotional issues. And as you were talking, I was just making a parallel to the South African context as well. In the mining communities, particularly in the Northwest province and Manahaway, the same, not similar, is happening. Where the communities actually now have samas, which are illegal miners, which are high support to them. Where the abandoned mines are now being taken people in the community because they have now, it's not syndicates where they are taking the gold or whatever to make those abandoned mines for themselves. But also what is striking for me is the similarity that they are also left with the after effects of those mines, like the environmental challenges that they have. And to me, the issue of the Zamazamas highlights how that even those African people, we have these valuable things like gold, natural resources, but in those communities, there's so much poverty and inequality that they are forced to put their lives at risk to search for these resources in abandoned mines. So it was just striking for me that even in the Brazilian context, we have the same sort of thing happening, which is a very neo-colonial thing, which is happening. Those mines are not owned by African people, yet they are the cheap labor that has to service the mines. And once we're done, it's such So for me, the act of leaving the bare mind, which has nothing left, so they're taking everything that they want to take and then they just leave it there. So it's a risk also to the people in that community like mine, but it also symbolizes how deep communalism goes. Because to me, it symbolizes that they take everything that they want to take from us and then just leave when they're done taking it. So just as you was presenting, I was thinking of the same parallel that's happening in this life. Thank you very much.
There's lots of questions, not really questions. I don't know if I should add on to them or not add,
Okay.
and then you can just respond to all, and then that should be the last round. But I mean, it's very rich, and I was going to, I mean, as you speak and engage with all, one is to reflect a little bit on the concept you have here of connected histories and why it's important to deploy, because also you're working with a comparative project, and I want to see how you understand it and how you deploy it, whether it's in the comparison. I like the notion of American civilization being a transatlantic civilization, which is also about the connections of people. But I want to see how else, just understand how else you are working with that concept. The other one is duress, which you also have, which is really looking at the context of duress in that space and how it has shifted. I can see, particularly with the ways in which the gold mines create this a particular vulnerable context, like you've demonstrated with the mud, and the air that is poisoned, just like in Jägersfontein, which is also similar. So I'm just wanting to see what you want to do with it, with the concept and how you're working with it. The last is more about value, and within the decolonial context, I understand about the state, I understand about corporations, but even though not totally true, the idea corporate mining is a colonial introduction. So it's funny when we argue that, this is the colonies and these are things that we own, but we forget that the idea of investing very deep monetary value and all of one's life in a stone that should normally not have a value is something that we inherited. So I'm trying to understand how that is shifting beyond just saying, this is our thing. Why are we spending so much time valuing a stone, and thinking that we have inherited and therefore we own this stone, What else are we thinking? Because embedded deep inside there is still the colonial mindset that there is so much value in this stone that's useless. Yeah. Those are my 3 questions. Yeah.
I will start by saying that I cannot answer all the questions.
Yes.
I can, just give few reflections on. To start with, Susanna, you are the co-author of this version of the presentation, because I talked to Susanna helped me very much yesterday. I had many. I created, but I think this was the 11th version, because she really helped me showing that it was important to really show where we were working and exactly what I was talking about, and also express this understanding that it's happening in many other places in the world, and when, for example, as it is somehow most of the societies are dealing with this issue. So getting back to your question, I think that that's the biggest issue. And one that define has been, we started discussing, which is the issue of, what democracy, what is really democracy, what does it mean, and what are democratic states, and how are, we have the reality of our elections. for example, the influence of those corporations in our elections is amazing. The coup d'etats that we have promoted by those corporations are very frequent. The government of Brazil now, for example, it really goes on a very difficult line of implementing social projects, investing in projects against for inclusion, but having to respond to the pressure, daily pressure, especially at the Congress, from the Congress, that obviously in the democratic system, the executive has to negotiate with the Congress and with the Supreme Court. So I think that an issue that we should deepen in our discussions, because, for example, in this state of Minas Gerais, mining corporations were the ones to subside the elections for the state governor. And that's the state governor today is there now, and many, many mayors. So those who go against are subject to all the all type of how do you call it when you discredit someone? They discredit people. They put lots of money on those who are their partners and take off money from those who are not. Even control, for example, in the case of the health system, even controlling the health system, not to create any possibility to relate, for example, their operations to the situation of people, mental, physical, and so on. So I think that the nature of the state, the nature of democracy is a very important issue for us to discuss in this process. And also, corruption, because many times we discuss corruption, focusing on the big money that some people receive from that. But we have to understand the subtle ways corruption operates in the territories also, because that's what really keeps the corporations, keeps the control of the corporations over territories, and then gives them the power to implement the big corruption with big projects, with indicating people. Sometime, if we have time, it would be very interesting to talk about the global initiative at the UN, for example, where those big corporations are part of, and that discussed by people who are from the UN also. So it's important to get that. Addison, I think that what I could start reflect on with you, because there are many other things, definitely it would be important to get in touch with those miniaturized group of youth, of young people. But this, you said the inescapability, right, of those reactions. I think that this is why I'm doing this work. Because is it unavoidable? Is this process unavoidable? Is it something that will be permanent? And will the world, and all democracies be ruled by those corporations and by this type of process? I think that that's the question. How far will it go? We've been discussing that with the Canadians, because I teach once every 2 years at a seminar at the Canadian University. And they were extremely shocked because the main owner of this Canadian company that is in the Amazon is considered a green, man in Canada, and was considered one of the most ecologically responsible owner, or owner of a mining company in Canada. So, I mean, what does it mean? And was he that responsible? Because that's not exactly what the Eskimo people relate, right, in Canada. Your very important, I forgot the name of my colleague in Orange.
Naledi.
Naledi.
Yes.
Naledi, you brought up very important issues for this work, which I cannot answer, but I've been thinking about. And I have to tell you, the questions you posted made me go back in some of the methodology. We cannot discuss those territories starting with the colonial era even. And I felt that with David Fontaine. If we discuss it from the Cape discovery on, we're not really examining what was happening in this territory that answers part of Divine's question, because those territories have always been under duress. And they have been since, before the colonial times in many situations, especially because of the way the Sahara was occupied. And most historians, I have a big debate with lots of other colleagues now, because now I've become a colleague, for example, and say, no, but we're not going to discuss the ancient history. No, we have to look at it. We have to look at it, because it was there that the concepts of human and non-human were organized. It's not being anti any type of religion, because it's different. We're talking about the pre-colonial processes of occupying spaces and of defining the scale of humanity. If you read Kant, for example, Kant, went back to the old books, to old history, to organize his timetable, as I say, and the definition of who is human, who's not human, who's more human, who's less human, in philosophy. And lots of people, when people tell me, oh, I'm a Kantian, I say, so, we have problems there. Because did you read that? Most people didn't. Most people didn't even read other things by Kant, for example, but didn't see where his philosophical basis was. So, I think that one of the definitions in this work is that to really understand the process of duress, we have to look at the whole historical process of the territories and how they were under duress, what type of pressure. And, I had two dialogues with people who were at the top in power. One was a president of one country, and the other one was a minister of international affairs of my own country. One of them asked me, oh, but why did we have lots of quilombos? Quilombos are land where enslaved people ran to and organized a process of production, cultural, and so on, in different areas of Brazil. Many of those places are where most of the copper, diamond, petroleum, and iron and other metals are in Brazil. Even now, the rare metals. So the question I received, I was titled in the land of those, issued the title to the land for those communities. So the question I had was, but how could those people, but why did those people choose those best places to live. They didn't choose. They had to hire there because they were protecting themselves from the colonial state. And they were the ones who really were fundamental in our freedom. So they were there not because they wanted to. There are the better water springs and things like this, or at those basins, as we saw. They didn't go there. And it's the same thing here. If you see, for example, the history of Fontaine, the people who were there, you know. And so Divine, just to finish, please let's deepen this discussion on cooperative mining that doesn't exist. That doesn't. Cooperation in mining doesn't exist. We're not talking about agriculture when people get together and celebrate because they have the first, corn. No, we're talking about a culture that if you find a piece of gold, you hire it, you never show anyone, you go away from that place because you don't want to show that you have this stone or this gold or whatever. We're talking about a culture that just brings corporations together because of interest and self-protection. So I think we should discuss this much better, from colonial time. And then I have many questions that I can't respond. And then who will help me, please?
Thank you very much, Dulce. And thank you very much, colleagues, and also the colleagues online for being here. Dulce is here for the next 1 year, so please, there is too many conversations to come. So this afternoon we have a book launch by Francis Nyamjo at the book lounge. It's at 5:30. To which you're invited. And then next week, we have another Ataya seminar by Musa Ndlovu, which is at also 1 o'clock, and to which you're invited. And the details are online. Yeah. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
And I have to go.
Yes.